for coming tonight. My name is Adrianne Delgado. I am a registered dietitian, and I work at Body Metrics. I don't know if any of you have heard of that before. Body Metrics Health and Wellness Services, we are an outpatient nutrition group in Limerick. We also have massage therapy, and that is because my husband's a massage therapist, and so he actually owned Body Metrics for, I want to say, a good 6 or 7 years before I even came onto the scene. And then when I decided to do outpatient nutrition, we were like, well, this doesn't make sense to have 2 tax ID numbers and go through all the stress of 2 businesses. So we just decided to kind of put our businesses together, and so that's why we have both nutrition and massage therapy. So just a little bit of background. So like I said, I'm a registered dietitian. I have 5 kids. So I have 3 boys, 14, 13, and 10. And then I have twin daughters that are 8. So my plan was to have 4 kids. God decided for me to have 5, right? That was not what I thought we were going to be doing, but let's go with it. So I have a really big family. We live in Royersford. We live on a farm, actually my husband's grandparents' farmhouse. So how I live is a little unconventional compared to maybe some of my neighbors. Just living on, a piece of land with chickens, and we grow a lot of our own food. Part of that is because we really enjoy it and we love health and nutrition, and part of it is because 5 kids are really, really expensive and we can't afford to buy groceries for them all year round. So, like I said, I'm a nutritionist by trade. I went to Westchester University as well. I graduated in 2001, did my internship. I did some clinical work for a while, had a lot of babies, and then decided to come back and do some outpatient work. Just a quick plug for Body Metrics, just to let you know about us. Most people don't realize that their health insurance covers nutrition counseling visits. So if you have any questions or need to see a dietitian for a reason, most likely your insurance will cover it. Okay, so depending on your diagnosis, and you can obviously afterwards ask me questions of anything nutrition related or coverage. I'd be happy to answer that for you. So basically, where this book, Nourish, Eat, Repeat, came from is I was having breakfast with my girlfriends. So there's a bunch of us, 4 of us, that like to get together once a month just to kind of catch up and check in with each other. And I was sharing one of those stories about nutrition, or no, I'm sorry, I apologize. I was just sharing one of the stories about our crazy, chaotic life. One of the kids was doing something silly or something that happened. And my girlfriend looked over at me and she said, "You are writing these stories down, right?" And I said, "Of course not. Who has time to write the stories down? And besides, I'll remember, except you don't remember, right?" I was having a conversation with my mom and she's like, "But Adrianne, remember, this happened with one of your other kids. Don't you remember?" And I said, "I don't. I had no recollection." And so I started thinking, maybe I don't have this all together. Maybe I'm not going to remember what I think I will. And so I decided I'm going to start a blog. All right? And this blog isn't going to be for the public. This is just going to be for our family, where we can kind of look back over the years and chuckle about those funny things that happened, or just kind of as a recollection or an account of all the things that our family's been through. And so I called it Farm, Faith, and Family, right? Because we live on a farm. Faith is a big part of my life, and obviously my large family. And I decided, you know what, I'm just going to write a couple things that I can think about, funny instances. Maybe it's the time, my son was, I think, 18 months old, and he decided to spill a whole gallon of milk on the carpet, right? Things like, we all cringe, but we're like, yeah, I remember those days when that happened. Just little stories that I could remember along the way, funny instances, and I just started to document them. Around the same time, I was listening to a lady speak. I don't know if any of you have heard of Marie Forleo before. Have you heard of that name? So Marie Forleo, her business is she's an online coach. And what she does is she talks to small business owners about business. And so she says, you guys know a lot about your craft and a lot about your industry, but you might not know a lot about running a business. And that had me written all over it, because I know nutrition, I know how to talk to people about nutrition, give people good ideas, finding diets that work for them. But I don't know the first thing about running a business because I didn't go to business school. My husband had some experience running his massage business, but really, we're kind of learning as we go. So I started following some of her work. And her tagline at the end of every single one of her videos is, keep going, because the world needs that special gift that only you can provide. And so I started thinking about it, like, what is that special gift that only I can provide? Like, why would somebody come to see me at Body Metrics versus some of my other talented colleagues? There's 6 dietitians there. We all went to this, roughly the same schools, we got the same education, so what makes me different than one of the other dietitians I work with? What makes Body Metrics different than the nutrition group you could go to down the street, right? As a business person, you start to think, how can I define ourselves? How can I make us different? And so I started really thinking about this and wrestling with the idea, what makes me different? What is this special gift I can give to the world that's different than any other person on this planet? And all of a sudden, I remember I was getting a shower one day, because sometimes you come up with your best ideas in random places, right? I was getting a shower and all of a sudden I'm like, it's my stories, right? It's my life experience. Nobody else on this whole entire planet has the exact life experiences that I do. And we might all have similar education, we might all have similar experiences, but the ones that I hold are unique to me. And as a mom of 5 children, I've got a lot of unique stories, right? Anytime you have a lot of personalities in one house, you've got stories. And so I started realizing what my special gift is and what I can offer to people is my unique perspective based off of my circumstances and based off of my story, my life events. And so I had this light bulb moment. What am I going to do with this? So I started thinking about this whole idea. I had started to blog different stories about our life. And then I started thinking about how can I connect these stories to nutrition lessons, right? So, that time that I had to take 2 twin girls who were 5 into the porta potty with life vests on? Telling you, that's a whole new dynamic. Going into a porta potty itself, not fun, right? We can all agree to that.
Right.
Taking 2 twin girls into a porta potty, that just takes it to a different level, right? Because you're like, do not touch a thing. Hands up. I'm trying to hold one girl up over the hole, which pretty much means she's peeing all over me, right? You're guaranteed that when you're trying to lift somebody up. Meanwhile, I'm like, don't touch anything, hands up. I want your hands where I can see you. Meanwhile, urine is going all down my arm, right? And then you throw into the mix, we were all wearing life vests. So you've got this life vest that's like up to here on your chin. You can't breathe. You can't hold your breath because the stench is horrific, right? Now, we may not all have that exact circumstance, but we can all think back to those crazy stories or those funny instances where we had a certain situation that was less than ideal, right? Mm-hmm. And so I took that story of when I had to take my twin girls into a porta potty with life vests on, and I started thinking about, hey, what if we talk about hydration, right? Because often, going to the bathroom drinking a lot of water often leads to going to the bathroom often. And so that's what I did. I took these stories from our life, our chaotic, crazy stories that had some humor to them, and I started connecting them to nutrition lessons, right? Well, let's talk about water for a little bit. What does that look like? How much do we need? Do we really need, 64 ounces? Is it a little bit more than that? Is it a little bit less than that? And so basically that's where the birth of Nourish, Eat, Repeat came from, connecting those stories. Part of what I do and what I teach is so much about execution, right? So people will come to me and I will talk to them about, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. But honestly, let's be real here. Nobody really cares. Just tell me what to do. Should I eat this or not eat it? Just tell me what you want me to do. I don't really care about the science behind a carbohydrate. Just how much fiber do I need? Just tell me what to eat, right? Most of the people that walk into my office, they don't care about the background. Just tell me what to do. because they think that's what they want, but then when I tell them what to do, oh, I don't want to do that, right? So what I wanted to do with this book was I really wanted to make it very applicable and very, I wanted it to feel like you were talking to a good friend, not somebody talking down on you, you need to do this, this, and that. Just somebody coming alongside of you and making suggestions that have worked in both my own personal family and in my clients that I teach every day. And so with this book, it is basically it almost has like a chicken soup for the soul feel. Like the stories don't build on each other. When we were first trying to figure out how to order the chapters, because, let me back up for a second. When I was writing the book, I basically had a list of all the funny events and all the nutrition lessons I wanted to talk about. And so I was like, all right, I'll talk about this, and I'll talk about this, and I just started drawing them out, right? These topics look like these would go good together. These topics look like I can pull that together. So every day I would sit at my computer and I would say, which one do I want to talk about today? And I would just start checking them off the list, right? So now I'm left with all these different stories. I had 51 stories, 52 stories, right? And I reached out to an editor. I know my stories, I know nutrition. I don't know a thing about writing a book. I don't know where commas are supposed to go, right? I have an idea, but that's not my specialty. So I reached out to a friend who had some connections, and I said, can you put me in, do you have an editor or somebody you know that does editing? And she put me in touch with a friend of hers who actually lived in Canada. And I told her the concept of the book, and I asked her how much she would charge, and she said it's about $1,000 per chapter. And I said, there's 52 chapters. What else you got for me? Right? I was like, oh, there's no way I can spend $52,000 on a book that I don't even know if it's going to sell or if anyone's going to like it. So I ended up finding another person to help me out. And one of our biggest challenges to the book was, how do we order this, right? Because I've got 52 stories. They don't necessarily build on each other because they're just little anecdotes from our life with a nutrition lesson. And so we first tried to do it chronological, like what happened first. Like when Jim and I first got married, and I had the fire department at my house probably, maybe 4 times in 6 months. Somebody decided to put a smoke alarm right next to the stove. Doesn't make sense to me, but when you are a new cook and you are like creating a lot of smoke and from, not knowing how to cook, which was me all over it, I had the fire department at my house several times. Not my best moment, but so do we start the book with that? Like that's kind of the beginning of our story and our journey. And it worked, but it was okay. Next we decided, so I have a whole bunch of stories about eating. I have a whole bunch of stories about consistency. And I have a whole bunch of stories about nourishing, like nourishing your body, nourishing your mind. So much of nutrition is the head part of it, right? The psychology behind food, how to deal with that. And so part of what we were doing was, do we put all the stories that have to do with nourishing your mind first, and then all the stories that have to do with the food part of it next, and then all the stories that have to do with consistency and repetition and building your habits. We tried that. And then what we found was a lot of the stories that were about nourishing your mind were heavier in nature, like just a heavier topic. And so I started to read through it, and I was like, these stories are too serious. Like that's not what the feel of this book is. Supposed to be more lighthearted, things that we can connect with and laugh at. And the topics in the very beginning were too heavy. I was like, I don't even want to read this book. It's depressing me. So then we're like, all right, we got to rewrite all of it. So basically what we did was we took those 51 chapters, because there's an epilogue story in there, but we took 51 chapters and we put them into themes. And with each theme, there's a nourish, eat, repeat component. And then you get to chapter 2, there's a nourish, eat, repeat component. And all of a sudden that felt really good. And so that's kind of where this story came from. So each chapter, there's 18 chapters with a nourish, eat, repeat component. And then at the end of each chapter are kind of take-home actions, right? So I realize that everybody's learning style is a little bit different. Some people like affirmations, some people like action items. No, just tell me what to do. What am I supposed to do this week, and I'll do it. So there's some of that in there. There's some reflection, because some people are more thoughtful, and so they like to journal their feelings. So I basically have whatever your learning style is, what to do based off of what you read that chapter. Then, at the end of each chapter, I have 2 5-star recipes. And they are called 5-star recipes because 5 out of 5 kids will eat them, right? So if I can get 5 out of 5 of my kids to eat it, there's a good chance you may get some of your picky eaters in your family to eat it too. And that is not isolated to just children, that is spouses as well, right? So I put in 5-star recipes because that was a big part. Again, it's the execution. I can teach you all day how, what kind of carbs to eat and what to look at on a label and best practices for mindfulness. But at the end of the day, what should I cook? Give me the recipes. Give me the easy stuff. As I mentioned in the book, I have yet for somebody to walk into my office and say, Adrianne, I've been thinking about this cooking thing, and by any chance, do you have a recipe that takes about 90 minutes, 2 hours to make? Right? I really want to develop the flavors. I really want to work at coaxing, every ounce of flavor. My family, we like to sit down together for at least an hour when we eat dinner. And so can you give me a recipe that I can be in the kitchen all day long, right? That will never, ever happen, right? Everybody that walks into my office, I need something quick and easy, right? I don't want to be in the kitchen. I've got things to do. I had one lady, she just got done telling me how she retired, and then she wanted a quick, easy recipe. And I'm like, but wait, you were just retired. You're supposed to have time. But that's not how it works, right? You start volunteering, you might be helping out with grandkids, you might be, running around still, doing other activities. Nobody wants something that takes a long time to cook. And so the recipes in here are geared and designed for people that don't want to be in the kitchen all day, but they want to eat healthier. I will say, I am not the type of dietitian that says everything has to be gluten-free and everything has to be vegetarian or vegan. That's not how we eat. I grew up in Lancaster County, and so I don't ever think I can give up my meat, potatoes, and vegetables, right? That's just how I was raised, and those are the foods I enjoy. But there are definite ways we can make them healthier, right? So those are some of the recipes in this book. And so that just gives you a little bit idea of where the idea was birthed. One of your questions was coming up with the title. Once we kind of knew what the book was about and kind of the flow, my husband and I were in bed one night, and I had my phone. I'm like, we have to come up with a title. We can't do anything else until we come up with a title. And he's like, we'll figure it out. I'm like, no, we have to figure it out tonight. It has to be tonight. And so we just went on Amazon and started looking at books about nourishing and food and health and nutrition, and just kept playing with words back and forth until we finally came up with it. So I wanted, originally I was thinking maybe I name it after that blog I wrote, like that Farm, Faith, and Family, but I was nervous. I'll be completely honest with you. I was nervous about putting faith in the title. Not because I'm ashamed of my faith, that's not it at all. It's because I sometimes am scared of religious people, right? If you put faith in the title, then there's an expectation that faith is going to be woven throughout. And that wasn't the feel of the book. Obviously, like I said, there's some chapters in there where I give some examples of my faith, but I didn't want that to be, you said it's about faith and it's not, or I didn't want to misrepresent the book. So that's why we decided to come up with a different title. All right. So Mark said I could read a little bit from the book. Is that okay with you? Sure. All right. So I was trying to get some feels from people in my office. I'm like, what story should I read? I want to make sure it's helpful. But I'm going to I figured I would land on this story, and I'll explain why in a second, but this is actually a topic that I talk a lot about to my clients. I do a lot with mindfulness and getting people to really pay attention to what they're doing versus just absent-mindedly grabbing food. I think that's just what we've been conditioned to do for so long. The person I met with tonight before coming over here, I was talking about the 4 eating styles. And I talk about fuel eating, joy eating, this thing called fog eating, and storm eating. And that's not in the book, so I'm giving you some bonus material here. But fog eating is distracted eating, right? Well, actually, let's go through the 4 eating styles, and then I'll read real quick. So the first one I said is fuel eating, right? Fuel, joy, fog, and storm. Fuel eating is exactly what you think it is. It's eating for fuel, giving your body nutrients, vitamins, minerals, energy. And ideally, that should be about 90% of our diets. Okay, so you may have heard the 80-20 rule. Let's be honest, it's really 90-10. Okay? So if you're eating fuel foods, about 90% of your diet should come from that. But here's the deal. You are the only person that can decide what fuel is to your body. Okay? This is why there will never ever be a one-size-fits-all approach to nutrition, because we are all different. Our bodies will respond differently to nutrition. So it's not enough to listen to what your neighbor's doing, or your coworker's doing, or your daughter's doing, or your neighbor's coworker's daughter's doing, right? There are 100 different ways to do this, and everybody's body responds differently. All right? Does me no good to come up here and talk about whole grains if you have celiac disease, because whole grains is not a fuel food for you. Some people might have GI issues when they eat certain fruits or vegetables. I can talk up here all day long about how great fruits and vegetables are, but if they don't make you feel well and they cause diarrhea or bloating or gassiness or any of that stuff, then that is not a fuel food for you. And that is why we cannot say that everybody needs to follow this diet. It just doesn't work that way. I'll give you another example. I had a husband and wife come into my office for weight loss. They were doing keto, right? You guys are familiar, or you've heard of keto diet before, right? So they're doing high-fat diet. The guy was responding great to it. He dropped 30 pounds. His lipid profile was better than it ever was, right? Which doesn't make sense, but whatever. Cholesterol was better, blood pressure was better. He was doing really well. The female, his wife, was doing everything the husband was doing. They ate the same meals, they ate the same portions, they were working out the same. She lost 6 pounds, and her cholesterol was almost at 600. Right? And so she looks at me and she says, I don't understand why I'm not having the same results as him. And I was like, it's easy. You have different parents. Right? You know, just because it works for one doesn't mean it's automatically and guaranteed to work for another. And I was like, you've got to promise me. And usually I don't tell people, like, I give recommendations and suggestions. But in this case, when your cholesterol is almost at 600, you cannot do this diet anymore. Like, you have to stop because you are this close to having a heart attack. And I really don't want you to have a heart attack while you're in this office. I don't want you to have a heart attack at all, but please do not have one in this office. Right? So in that case, the keto diet was not helpful for her. For him, it was working. His blood lipid levels were actually improving. And so with a guidance of a doctor and somebody monitoring you, that could be a diet that works, but not for everybody. And so fuel foods, that 90% of fuel foods is figuring out what works for you. And that may be different than somebody else in your family or in your neighborhood. So that's 90% of our diet. 10% of our diet should be joy foods. All right? Now we get excited and we start to pay attention because she said the word joy. Right? Joy food is exactly what you think it is. Joy food is for pleasure. It's for enjoyment. For so many of us, when we try to make fuel foods be 100% of the diet, we become resentful and rebellious. Right? We think we want a whole bunch of rules. Just tell me what to do. until we have the bunch of rules, and then we're like, I don't want to do this. Or I'm going out Saturday night. I don't want to have to follow these rules. And so then we get resentful that we have rules in the first place, and then whenever we get resentful, we want to rebel. That's human nature. All right? And so joy foods can be part of our diet. They need to be part of our diet. Fuel foods cannot be 100% because then we get resentful and then we binge. So it does not work. But there are a couple of rules around joy foods. Number one, you have to stop eating joy foods when you've met your 10%. Right? You have to stop eating your joy foods when it's no longer bringing you joy. How often do you eat something and the first couple bites are great, but then after that it's not bringing you joy anymore? But if you have a couple more bites left, you just finish it anyway because you don't want to be wasteful. That doesn't work, right? Joy foods are only 10% of your diet, so you better make sure you're enjoying them because it's not a big percentage. Rule number 3 when it comes to joy foods is you are not allowed to eat joy foods in a car, and you are not allowed to eat joy foods in front of a screen. Again, you only get 10% of your diet to be joy foods. Do not waste that opportunity by not paying attention. I can go as far, since we are in a library, and start quoting Dr. Seuss. You cannot eat them on a boat. You cannot eat them with a goat. You cannot eat them in here or there or anywhere, right? Do not eat joy foods distracted. So we've got fuel foods being 90%, we've got joy foods being 10%. We still have 2 more types of eating, but we're at 100%. So these other 2 types of eating, they're not encouraged, but we know that they happen, and as long as they're happening truly once in a while, it's not a big deal. It's when they're happening every day on a reoccurring basis, then we got something we gotta work through. So the third eating style is fog eating, and that's distracted eating. Right? That's when you're watching a TV show and you're eating a bag of pretzels and all of a sudden you go to put your, I see some giggling back there, right? This has happened once or twice. And you reach your hand in there and you're like, who ate all the pretzels? And then you realize you're the only one in the room, right? It's you. It's distracted eating. It happens, but it's not paying attention, right? If you go to the movie theater and you eat a bag of, or a bowl of popcorn, and I ask you, how did bite number 6 taste? I don't know. That's right, you don't know because you weren't paying attention. And a lot of times when we eat distracted, we're overeating because we're not listening to hunger and fullness cues. And when people are coming to me for some help with weight management, that's something that we can identify as a helpful practice. So this fog eating is distracted eating. And normally what I say is we got to try to figure out, what are you trying to check out from? Because that's really what distracted eating is. I don't want to pay attention. I've had a hard day or I had a hard week. I just want to eat whatever I want to eat in front of the TV because that brings me joy. I'm like, well, I can understand that. However, if it's truly a food that's bringing you joy, I want you to pay attention to that, and I want you to be, sitting at a table. But if you're trying to check out from the week or the day or whatever's going on, then we might have some more work to do to figure that out and see if we can come up with more appropriate ways to combat that negative emotion that you're trying to check out from. So the third eating is fog eating. Again, we want to try to discourage that or find more constructive ways to deal with those uncomfortable emotions. And the fourth eating style is storm eating or binge eating. And so the number 1 rule when it comes to storm eating is you are not allowed to judge yourself, because the minute you judge yourself is the minute you invite another storm. Right? If you saw a 3-year-old who was just going to town binging on food, right? You would probably not go to that 3-year-old and be like, what is your problem? Why are you doing this? Why are you so stupid? You know better. You would never talk to a 3-year-old that way. But how often do you talk that way to yourself? How often do you criticize and judge your eating behavior? You know better. What is wrong with you? Why don't you have any more willpower? When are you going to get it together? And then you start making a bunch more rules, right? Because if you can't figure it out with what you're giving yourself and what you're allotting yourself to eat, maybe if you make the rules more narrow, you'll do better. But remember what happens when we make our rules more narrow. We become more resentful and more rebellious. And so we would never, ever, excuse me, talk to a 3-year-old with that tone or those negative words. More likely than not, we would probably like kneel, right? We'd get down here, we'd get to their level, we'd put our hands on their back. We'd probably be like, hey, what's going on? Did something happen today? Did somebody say something to you? Did you get in a fight with somebody? We would become very curious about what happened so we could have a conversation about it. We wouldn't be critical, screaming at the child. In order to do this nutrition thing well, I always tell people you have to be kinder to yourself than any other person on this planet. Right? You have to be. Because shame and blame never motivate. Kindness does. And that sounds kind of like, that's kind of a quirky thing to say, or that sounds nice, but it's absolutely true. So I give this example, and it's in the book, about how I played tennis for Westchester. And I was decent. I played number 1. And one day, I don't know if any of you have played tennis before, but one day, I wasn't my best day, right? Some days you show up and everything's going your way, and other days you're like, geez, everything is just so much harder. And so I'm playing tennis, and I'm just missing my shots. And I would say they frown upon throwing your racket. Yes, they don't like you doing that. But, I was just so frustrated with myself for missing the shots. And instead of throwing my racket like I wanted to, I just whacked the side of my leg. Because I was just angry. I didn't say it was a smart decision. I just said I whacked myself in the side of the leg. And it hurt, as you would expect it to. And all of a sudden I had this idea, you know what? Anytime you miss the ball, you have permission to whack yourself in the leg. Maybe that negative reinforcement will prompt you to do better. Because who wants to whack themselves in the leg? I know it was twisted. Didn't make sense at the time, looking back on it. I know it was not a smart decision, but in the moment, I was so frustrated by the lack of skill that I was showing that day. And so I decided anytime I missed the shot, I was going to whack myself in the leg to kind of whip me into shape. And you know what happened? My game got worse, right? Because I couldn't get in position to hit the ball because I was limping, because my leg hurt. And with tennis, if you've ever played tennis before, you know it's all about getting into position. If you're not in position to get the ball, you're not at a place where you can hit and put the right top spin on so that the ball stays in the court. So now I'm like missing more balls because I'm limping to get to them. And what I realized, then I had this aha moment, Adrianne, your technique is flawed. Right? What I thought was going to motivate me, all that negative talk and that pain was going to motivate me, it actually got me further away from the goal. And so my question for some people is your technique flawed when it comes to nutrition? Is your technique flawed in the way you're speaking to yourself or the way you're judging yourself about how you're eating? Shame and blame and guilt will never ever motivate, but kindness will. Once I was kind to my body again and I wasn't beating it up, I could actually get to the ball and do what I was supposed to do. And so some of what this book is about is figuring out where our techniques are flawed and looking, maybe there's a different way. All right? So, with all that said, now I'm going to read for you a section of the book about mindfulness. But of course there's a story before it because I told you there's stories in front of all of them. So this one is from chapter 7. All right, so it's the Nourish section. I told you each chapter has a Nourish, Eat, Repeat, so we're going to start from the Nourish section. It's called Indoor Picnic Tables. All right. About 4 years ago, we were sitting around our dining room table one Saturday afternoon eating lunch as a family. As you can imagine, a large family eating lunch, or any meal for that matter, let's be honest, always produces a huge mess. The table and floor are a disaster, and sometimes the walls get in on the action. One time Jim, now Jim's my husband, okay? One time Jim found broccoli hidden in an antique metal pot sitting on the side table. The real treat is finding moldy food in a corner. Jim always said there is no reason to get a pet because we live with animals. meals. At the time of this particular meal, we had a dining room table utilizing 2 or 3 extender leaves. Jim bought it for $25 at a moving sale down the road, and we felt like we hit the jackpot. The only problem with a table that has leaves and 7 people gathered around it is that food would frequently get stuck in the cracks between them. Right? You guys can attest to this. After every meal, we would have to pull the table apart to clean it, which normally turned into a once-a-week job since we only had enough energy to do so that frequently. It was a pain, but our alternative to purchase a new table just wasn't in the budget. After lunch, Jim decided to pull the table apart to clean it. Once he started pulling and saw the mess we needed to clean up, I heard him mutter, "Forget it," and then watched him begin to disassemble the table. I started to question what he was doing, but he didn't say a word. He just continued pulling apart the table until it was in pieces small enough to get out the door. The next thing I know, he had his keys in hand and walked outside. I ran after him, but by the time I caught up, he was already backing out of the driveway. My confused look prompted him to tell me that he would be right back. It's not like Jim to storm out of the house or leave us for any extended amount of time in anger, so I was thoroughly confused about what just happened. I didn't have time to dwell on it, though, because I had my own list of things to do. I yelled for him to take a kid or two wherever he was heading, and then proceeded back inside to wash the dishes. An hour later, I heard Jim's car roll into the driveway. I was folding laundry in the back room when I heard this thud coming from the dining room, followed by a screeching sound as he unlocked the legs to a folding table. That's right, the love of my life just brought home a Costco brand outdoor picnic table, complete with attached benches, and he was smiling from ear to ear. The best part about this table is if it gets too dirty, we can just fold it up and hose it down outside. Isn't this great? I still remember. Okay. I'm sorry, what just happened? No, this is not great. You just disassembled and threw out our perfectly good wooden normal table and replaced it with an outdoor industrial picnic table. This had to be a joke. This was only temporary, right? Please say we are going to the furniture store next week to replace this plastic table. I bet you'll never guess what our dining room table looked like 4 years later. If you guessed the Costco picnic table, you're a winner. In Jim's defense, it really did wipe down nicely, and we didn't have the chore of cleaning in between leaves any longer. It had become our story for so long that I didn't even notice its oddity. That is until someone new came to visit and did a double take when she saw the table. Oh, that's right, yes, you are seeing that correctly. That is an outdoor picnic table with a tablecloth on top. Don't ask, let's just all pretend it's normal. All right, I'm just gonna skip over to this next part because it says, mindful eating is intentional. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit because I want to make sure I give the part about the mindfulness. And so what I want to talk next is about mindful eating tips, and all of these tips begin with the letter S. The first S stands for sit down to eat, and I'm going to take the liberty and add at a table from a plate. This is a big one and probably the one I personally struggled with the most. Whatever your situation, sitting down to eat from a plate speaks intention. It says, I'm engaged in what I'm doing and I'm not going to be distracted by what is going around me. At our house, we have a peninsula in our kitchen with 2 stools. It is a rare occasion I get to sit down on one of those stools since they are always occupied by a child. So I used to find it just easier to eat my meals standing up on the other side, ready to get condiments, drinks, or extra utensils someone else may need. It was a bad habit I had developed and often led to me overeating because of all the distractions. I wasn't fully enjoying my meal because of all the interruptions. More times than not, I ate faster when I was standing. One morning, Jim made himself an egg sandwich and I watched him stand over the counter to eat it. When I suggested he sit down, he replied, "Why? I'll be done eating it in 30 seconds. That's exactly the point I was trying to make. Another bad habit I developed was eating at the counter while standing up when I arrived home at night after work. Since I tend to work more evenings, I got home late and I'm hungry, and I would tell myself, I'm only going to eat a few bites of leftover dinner, so why bother going through the work of sitting down and getting a plate? Before I knew it, those first few bites would show me how hungry I really was, and I would start to inhale the food. Putting the food on a plate and sitting down has guaranteed that I am more intentional about the volume I'm consuming. Think of it this way. For those of you with kids, I want you to think about a time when you were at a family member's or friend's house for a party. Your 4-year-old comes up to you and says he's hungry. Now you know he must really be hungry because 4-year-olds would rather play than eat. You fix him a plate and then usher him over to the table to start eating so he doesn't make a mess on your host's floors. At the first sign of fullness, he gets up from the table and goes back to playing with the other kids. Now I want you to think about your own eating habits. You're at a party and all the food is sitting out on a table. Everyone is socializing and snacking from the buffet. You mindlessly grab 2 pretzel sticks and start munching. Before you know it, you have lost count and have no clue how many you have eaten. Was it 8 or 28 pretzel sticks? Who knows, because you're not paying attention. If you had to go get a plate and put a few pretzel sticks on it and then find a table to sit away from your friends, like you did for your 4-year-old, you may find that those 2 pretzel sticks don't seem very important anymore. First, you may realize you're not even hungry, and second, you don't want to miss out on the conversation. Sitting down and eating from a plate means you're committed to the task at hand. Sitting down and eating from a plate speaks mindfulness and will set you up for success. So I share that story because I know Super Bowl is coming up, right, on Sunday. And I want you to think about parties, right? How often do you know exactly what you consumed when you're at a party and there's a buffet of food setting up, right?
No.
I always say, think about when you're at a wedding, right? When you're at a wedding during cocktail hour and they're bringing food around, right? How much food did you consume during cocktail hour? Most people are like, I think I probably had 1 of these and 2 of these. Like, did you? Right? Nobody knows. The only people that know exactly how much they consumed during cocktail hour at a wedding is the 90-year-old women who had to sit at a table and somebody brought the food to them. Seriously, those are the only people that know how much they consumed because they sat down and they paid attention to what they were eating. Everybody else, you're socializing, and that's not a bad thing. It's just you have no clue how much you consumed. And for the majority of people, you have consumed a meal's worth of calories, and then you're going to go walk into a big room and eat dinner, right? So when it comes to overeating, if you tell yourself you have to put the food on a plate and then sit down to eat, you're more likely to know exactly how much you consumed. And so these are just some of the tips that I give in here. I wanted to read one more part, and I do talk about toddlers here, so think back to your days if you've had kids or grandkids. This is called hurting toddlers. So in my experience, I've come across 2 major groups of people that struggle the most when it comes to weight loss: former athletes and people who have had success losing weight in the past. We'll focus first on those individuals who have had prior success because there is a valuable lesson to be learned from their thoughts and experiences. Later in the book, we'll discuss former athletes in more detail. The reason why the successful dieter struggles so much down the road is that she remembers where she left off when things were going really well. The successful dieter remembers the discipline she had around eating the right foods and consistency working out. Health was a part of her everyday schedule and routine. The successful dieter remembers how great she felt when everything was going her way. One day, though, something happened. It could have been a job change, a newborn baby, an injury, or a vacation. Whatever it was, it disrupted the schedule, it derailed the routine. Not far behind was the struggle. There was motivation to get back into the routine, but things were different now. It was harder than the first time around. For her, it was followed by a complete and utter fall off the wagon. Not a slight roll off the wagon, but a skin your knees, get medical intervention kind of fall. And over time, the wagon was soon out of her line of sight. The story doesn't end there. A day will come when the successful dieter gets motivated again. Office challenges, the new year, heck, even a Monday will do it. But she can't seem to find her way back to health utopia. She does all the right things the first 3 days. She packs her meals, throws away all the junk food, goes to the gym, keeps a journal on food intake. But then life gets in the way again, and the following week, success drops off. This week, the successful dieter may only accomplish one of the things on her list, and because most of us follow the I'm either doing it all right or it's all wrong approach, she gives up again. She may try it again, but she feels so overwhelmed to get it all perfect that she gives up even faster than the last time. This only leads to more frustration, shame, and grief. Everything feels impossible. Can you resonate with this story? I see it all the time in my office. I have to remind my patients that the reason it's harder the second, third, fourth, or 20th time around is because their expectations are such that the starting line has moved to where the finish line was before things fell apart. The reason the successful dieter struggles is because she has an expectation that she is just going to pick up exactly where she left off, and when things don't look exactly like that, she feels like she's failing, so she gives up. I frequently present this idea to my patients, and I skipped a paragraph because I wanted to cut down here, and I don't know if that made sense then. If you get so caught up in trying to make things look the way they once did, you are sure to feel overwhelmed. You can't make it look exactly the way it was before because you're in a different time and place. You are not the same person as you were before. You may have new roles and responsibilities, which automatically makes this time different. So the heading is choose one thing. I frequently present this idea to my patients, and if you have had or had toddlers, this will make perfect sense. Let's say you're going to run a race with your friends. Their names are meal planning, healthy eating, eliminating desserts at night, exercise, stress management, and sleep. The plan is to all run at the same pace so you can stay together. How fun! It will be exactly like the time you ran the race last year. Your motivation and expectations are high, and there is a small level of thrill as you anticipate the starting gun going off. There's only one problem. I left out one little detail. The friends you are running with, they're toddlers. Have you ever tried to line up toddlers? It's virtually impossible. You get one toddler in position, you tell him to stay in his place, you turn your head for not even a second to line up the next toddler, and the first kid has already left his spot. So what do? You go back to the first toddler, you tell him more sternly, stay in your position, you turn your head to grab the next kid, only to find the first kid has left his spot again. Right? Herding toddlers is like herding cats. They do what they want, not what you want. You spend so much time and energy trying to line everyone up correctly at the starting line that you have no energy left to run the actual race. After a few more failed attempts at trying to get everyone in position, it's just easier to give up. That is what it's like when you try to get everything perfect with your diet. You will put so much time and energy into trying to line everything up perfectly to start that you won't have any energy left to actually live the healthy lifestyle with any form of consistency. If you're spending more time trying to get everything lined up than actually putting in the work, then we need to find a new way. Lucky for you, I have the answer. Turning toddlers into ducklings. So here's the answer. Grab the hand of one toddler. I don't care if you grab the toddler that's standing the closest to you or the one that's easiest to catch. Just grab a hand and cross the start line. If sleep is the easiest thing for you to manage right now, start there. If eating more fruit is the step that seems the most realistic to you, start there. Start somewhere and gain momentum. Start moving forward and gaining confidence. The bottom line is to just get started. Don't wait until you get it perfect. If you're waiting for all of your toddlers to line up on their own, you're going to be waiting for a really long time. What I found in my experience with kids is that if you start moving forward with one toddler, the other kids will follow. Imagine a mama duck and her row of ducklings behind her. The mama duck starts walking, and before you know it, the rest of the ducklings fall in line as if to say, I wonder where they're going. I want to go too. I can still vividly recall the times where we raised ducklings on our farm. It's so much fun to get them to follow you. They don't care where they're going, they just want to come along for the adventure. It's the same with toddlers and the same with your health goals. If all of a sudden you start sleeping longer, you may find you have more energy to expend in the day. You may find you actually want to go to the gym after work because you have the energy to do it. When you start going to the gym, you may find that you start making healthier dietary choices because you notice you have less cramps on the treadmill after you eat a packed lunch versus when you go to McDonald's. Instead of trying to do it all from the beginning, you let the momentum of one change lead the way for all other positive change. Moving forward is the quickest way to change. I challenge you to ditch the get it perfect from the beginning mentality and just start somewhere. Don't worry about how your new normal compares with your previous attempts. Don't look behind, just move forward. And so I think that's where a lot of people struggle, right? We try to get it all perfect, right? When you think about your health goals or you think about the new year, you're like, okay, I want to sleep, I want to go to bed on time, and I want to drink my water, and I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then what happens is we want to do so many things that we end up doing nothing because it's too overwhelming. And so that's what it's like when you start a race, right? You want everyone lined up perfectly, but you spend more time getting everyone lined up than you actually do moving forward. And next thing you know, another year has gone by and you've done nothing. And so that's what this book is about. It's about challenging you to pick one thing and let the change and the motivation of one thing bleed into other areas of your life, just like I mentioned. That's something that I see a lot of my patients struggle with. And so I wanted to try to help more people by putting it to paper and hopefully giving them the confidence to move forward. So I just talked for a really long time. You guys have been so patient. Do you have any questions for me, or how can I help you?
How much is the book?
It's $19.99 plus tax, so I think it's $21.19. And you can ask me nutrition questions too. I am here to help. You have a free dietitian consult at your fingertips. Oh, food, yes. Oh, go ahead.
What tips do you have for getting more water intake when you don't like water?
Great question. So you can do infused waters. Like, I don't know if you put cucumber or mint or berries or citrus into your water. Some people like the flavored seltzers. I just always say be careful. You don't want any artificial sweeteners in there. A lot of flavored seltzers now have sugar alcohols as the flavoring. Just be careful. It's not with everybody, but for some people, things like xylitol, mannitol, sorbitol, erythritol, which are the sugar alcohols, they end in OL. They can cause a lot of GI distress, like bloating and gassiness. So if you notice that you're a little bit more gassier than normal and you're drinking flavored seltzers, that could be to blame. So again, not in every single person, but in a lot of people, they notice that. So that might be helpful. I always say drink through a straw, right? For some reason, straws make you drink more. Water always through a straw, alcohol never through a straw. For the same reason. Yeah. All right. But I find I just drink a lot more when I have a straw versus if I have to unscrew or fill my water cup up. Holding a water bottle, taking it everywhere you go is also helpful. I forgot to mention, and I have plenty here. We just started to put pieces up here, but this is actually the chocolate cake recipe from the book. I believe it's chapter 11. Yes. And so this is a 5-star recipe. These are the ingredients. So it is not made with flour. It's actually made with cannellini beans. All right. So it has a much more dense consistency. It's almost like fudgy, like a brownie. But I do list all the ingredients on here, so in case there's food allergies and you need to consult with that first. But I have a whole entire 9x13 pan here that we can all enjoy. So I'd love for you to try it if you're open and willing to, just so you can get an idea of what kind of recipes I have in here. And you are more than helpful to come up here and check out some of the recipes and ideas to see if it's of interest to you. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yep.
go ahead.
Okay, a person told me to lose weight,
Uh-huh.
eat half of what's on your plate,
Okay.
and no eating after 8 p.m.
Okay. Are you doing it?
No.
So when it comes to weight loss, it's all about what you're eating and how much you're eating, right? So that's really addressing the volume. Do you feel like volume is your biggest challenge?
Yes.
Okay, so then that advice would make sense. I guess it depends on how big is your plate, right? If you've ever seen, I didn't bring a plate with me, but I go by the My Plate And so when you're looking at your plate, half of your plate should be vegetables, a quarter should be your protein, so about the size and the palm of your thickness of your hand, that's the thickness of your palm. If you have big hands, get excited because you get a bigger serving, right? It's proportionate to your body. If you have small hands, then you get a smaller piece. But a quarter of your plate should be the size and the thickness of your palm for your protein, and then the other quarter of your plate should be your starch. Now, a lot of people will omit the starch because they're trying to lose weight faster, right? Let's get rid of carbs because we can lose more weight. What I find though is that starch, it's a placeholder, right? And if you eliminate it and you just eat protein and vegetables, you will probably lose weight a little bit faster, but then at nighttime you're gonna be starving. And I'd much rather you eat an 80-calorie starch at dinner than a 500-calorie snack before bed. So in some cases, it makes sense to put the starch on your plate. But, not bad advice, where do you eat most of your calories? Is it at nighttime? Or is it during the day?
Probably all the time.
All the time? Well, and part of that is maybe not eating enough calories during the day, and then by the time you get to nighttime, you're hungry. And so that's where kind of some of that advice, don't eat after 8 o'clock. I personally don't care if you eat after 8 o'clock, I care what you eat after 8 o'clock. Because I want people to eat proactively. I want people to anticipate what is their activity for the next 2 to 3 hours, and then eat for that. If your next 2 to 3 hours you're going to bed or you're sitting on the sofa watching TV, how many calories do you burn to do that? 75, 100 if we're being generous. So your snack should match that. Eat a snack that's 75 to 100 calories. The problem is that's not what we do, right? We pull out the chips, we pull out the cookies, we pull out the junk food, and next thing you know, we're 400 or 500 calories deep, and then we're gonna go to bed. So we don't even have an opportunity to burn that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I don't care if you eat after 8 o'clock, I care what you eat after 8 o'clock, because it has to match your anticipated activity. It just makes sense. So, that advice, not bad advice, but you gotta look at the whole picture. I don't think you can just put that blanket statement out there and assume it's gonna help everybody. Yeah?
What's your feeling on eggs? Because I read somewhere they're good for you and other times they say they're not so good for you.
Yeah, it depends what day of the week.
Yeah,
So I eat 2 eggs every single morning. I love eggs. They fill me up. They good protein. It depends on your blood work, right? So we do know that dietary cholesterol does not impact your blood cholesterol like we once thought. It has to do more with saturated fat. Now there is about 5 grams of saturated fat in an egg. So if you are predisposed to having your cholesterol levels are sensitive to saturated fat, then maybe having eggs every day is not the best choice for you. But in terms of saying eggs are terrible, I don't agree with that because I eat them every day and I enjoy them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about avocados?
Uh-huh.
Because they're what, high in
They're high in fat,
fats.
but they're the good healthy fats. So
Okay.
again, if you're doing fats that are higher in like monounsaturated fats, they're not going to increase your LDL levels.
Okay,
It's the saturated fats that typically increase LDL.
so they are good to eat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they are still have calories.
Right.
So if you're eating 250 calories worth of avocado every day, above and beyond what your needs are, you're going to gain weight. So there it goes back to what you're eating and the volume. If you work it in so that it's part of your calories, absolutely.
What about popcorn as a nighttime snack
Mhm.
without butter?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Popcorn's one of those things that you can have like 3 cups for like 100 calories. So you get a lot of volume, plus it's a lot of fiber. So I think it's a great snack. I like to pair carbs and proteins together just for more fullness. So that would take care of your carb part, but it is a high fiber snack as long as you're not adding all the junk to it. Yep. Good questions.
I think that one of the problems is there's just such a plethora of information out there that one minute this is good for you, that next minute that's not good for you, or you have to eat kale all the time, you just forget about spinach anymore.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it just gets so overwhelming.
Sure does. It gets overwhelming for us because we got to stay on top of it to keep you guys and keep
Yeah.
everyone in check. So there's actually a part in the book where I go over reading labels, and then on the back of it I actually have a nutrition label and I kind of go through everything. So when you're at the grocery store, these are the top things to look for. So a lot of people will come into my office and be like, well, what about this cereal? Is this cereal okay? I'm like, there are over like 100 cereals. I can't have them all memorized. But what I can do is teach you what to look for on a label so you can decide, is this good for you? So how much fiber should it have? You know, how many added sugars should it have? If it falls into those categories, then you can buy that cereal with confidence and be like, this is a healthy cereal for me. Rather than going through all the different, it's good this week, it's bad this week, let's just go with what do we know to be true, instead of getting caught up in the latest fad diets that actually leave us feeling, you know, they screw up our metabolisms even more so, they're really hard on our heart, and it just, again, it leaves us feeling defeated and dejected when we can't follow these ridiculous guidelines that these diets make for us. You have to remember, dieting is a $1 trillion industry. They thrive on you not being able to succeed and feeling bad about yourself in the process. That's how they get you to buy more things. This is about like taking back the control and being in the court, in the driver's seat, and knowing what I'm doing is actually good for myself. It's not going to win any awards for being fancy and crazy, but fancy and crazy isn't what gets you success. I tell all my patients all the time, my most successful people, the ones that have lost like 75, 80, 100 pounds, they fail just as many times as you and I do. The difference is they get back up, right? For so many of us, we try something, it doesn't work, oh, I guess it doesn't work, and then they just stop. No, there's things that, you know, they get back up and they try again. They do different things. They start listening to their bodies instead of listening to what some diet tells them they should eat for breakfast. A lot of what I teach is figuring out what is the right volume for you. And so if I tell you you can only eat a half a cup of oatmeal, well, if you're hungry again in 45 minutes, then that's not the right portion for you, right? So a lot of it is trying to figure out what is your body telling you, because it will tell you everything you need, but that's not flashy, and that's not exciting, so that doesn't sell, but it's what gets results. So, but you're right, there's a ton of stuff out there. It makes it very confusing, but I guess gives me job security, so.
That's true.
Any other questions I can help you with? Like I said, please feel free when you guys are ready, come up here. I'd love for you to try some cake, check out the book, see what you think of it, and I'll answer any more questions you have. Yeah?
Could I ask how you prepare your 2 eggs every day? Do you fry them? Do you fry them?
Sure
Butter?
do.
In olive oil?
No.
Butter?
All right, you ready for my guilty pleasure? All right, I do a lot of great healthy things, but my breakfast in the morning, I think, okay, I can't believe I'm telling you this. So, I make bacon twice a year. That's all, like, we don't eat bacon hardly at all. But I make bacon twice a year, and when I make bacon, I make it on a broiler pan so that all the fat drips off of it. And then I take that fat and I pour it into a mason jar. And I take just the tiniest bit of bacon fat and I fry my eggs in that. But listen, that little jar lasts me 6 months, and I eat eggs every day. So that tells you how much bacon fat I'm using, right? I'm using just the littlest sliver to give it that smoky flavor without eating bacon. But it makes me feel like I'm eating a little bit. So sometimes we talk about portion control and sometimes we talk about eating healthier stuff. But that's my thing. That's what I do every morning. But then I'm also making other changes later on to balance that out. So I would not just tell everybody, start frying up some bacon and cook your eggs in it every morning if the rest of your diet doesn't support that. But you asked, and so I will be honest with you.
Thank
Now I
you.
have a question about the bacon fat.
Oh, here we go.
So you put it in a mason jar, do you have to refrigerate that?
I do.
Okay.
I'm not condoning or promoting to put bacon fat with your egg. It's just I would be honest with you.
It's better than having the bacon.
Yeah.
I said like we eat bacon twice a year, maybe
Yeah.
if that. So
And it's so bad, I like that idea.
yeah.
My mom always did that.
I was gonna say, we have some in the refrigerator all the time, the bacon.
And you give some to the birds, and then you eat them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I do. I don't think I put that in the book, though, so that's just between us. We might need to edit that out for the YouTube channel. want to destroy my reputation. Yeah, but there's actually, I even have in chapter 1, there's like a mason jar omelet idea. Usually when it comes to eggs, you know, the food prep is the most daunting part of it. So if there's ways that you can expedite that process, there's a recipe in that, how to make it really quick and easy. And so you can almost do like an omelet every morning. So, any other questions? Yeah?
How much water should you drink a day?
Half your body weight in ounces is a good place to start. So,
Half your body weight in ounces.
yeah, so if you weigh 200 pounds, 100 ounces. It's a lot of water right now.
Oh my gosh.
And if you drink something that's like dehydrating, do you have to replenish that?
Should,
Yeah.
yeah. This is actually a time of year where a lot of people do get dehydrated because they're not thinking about it, but all that dry heat from the heaters or baseboard heats. What was I gonna say? Here's a tip though about weight loss. If you go into the kitchen and you don't know what you want, you are not hungry, you are thirsty. When you are mildly to moderately dehydrated, it can be commonly misinterpreted by your body as hunger. So if you've ever opened up the refrigerator door, you're like, what do I want? And then you eat something, you're like, no, that wasn't it. What do I want? That is not hunger, that is thirst. And remember, just mild or moderate dehydration will get those two thoughts confused. If you are adequately hydrated, you will not get it confused because you will be able to know this is a thirst or this is a hunger. All right, there's
That's
your
when you
tip.
grab a beer.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that's your tilt to center.
We all have them, right?
10, 90.
So, yeah, and so again, like I said, if you have questions about the book or even about nutrition counseling, like if you'd like to learn a little bit more about, you know, your particular diet, we can absolutely help you out with that. Like I said, I'm one of 6 dietitians at our practice, and we are open evenings and weekends because, in addition to daytime hours, because we know people are busy. So, here to help you however we can.
Great.
Typically, how does that?
How does that work?
I just wondered typically, you know, like somebody would come into you and speak with you for a while and then, I don't know, they come back in a week or 2 or?
Yeah, so some of it depends on your insurance, right? So some insurances, like Aetna, gives 10 one-hour visits.
Okay.
Personal Choice, Keystone Health Pennies, they give 6 visits per calendar year. I think Cigna gives 3 visits. Medicare will only reimburse for diabetes or renal. So if you have something else, they won't cover for that. We do offer cash packages as well. But really it's based off of you come into us, you're like, this is what's going on, this is my goals, and then we just basically help build a bridge, right? We talk about, okay, this would be helpful, but it's very patient-centered. You're gonna drive we're just gonna give you suggestions along the way of how you can expedite that